They said I died in the fire. I heard them. One of the neighbors, whispering to another as the smoke still curled up from the ruins of my house. Poor Mrs. Hendricks. Burned alive, can you imagine? I was standing 30 feet away in a raincoat, soot-streaked, invisible. No one noticed the old woman by the garage. That's the thing about getting older. People stop seeing you long before you're gone. But I wasn't gone. I had filmed everything. It wasn't bravery. It was luck and a bad hip that kept me sleeping in the garage that night. Or maybe instinct. A whisper from somewhere. Maybe my late husband. Maybe just that little twitch behind the ribs that we women learn to trust after decades of being lied to. Either way, I had gone out there with my thermos and my blanket and locked the door from the inside. I had my small video camera with me. That part was deliberate. I'd set it up on a shelf 3 days earlier when Jason started asking too many questions about the locks. When he said, "Just sign this, Mom, it's standard," and didn't meet my eyes. That night, I told myself I wasn't being paranoid. I just wanted proof, in case. At 3:12 a.m., they came. I woke to the click of the back gate. My clock radio, old but reliable, blinked the time in red. The camera's green light was on. I didn't move. I could hear footsteps. 2 sets. Low voices. One of them laughing. I knew that laugh. I nursed it when he was 2 years old, and it came out in hiccups after a bottle. Now it sounded like it belonged to a stranger. Gasoline smells the same in every decade. That harsh, acidic stink that gets into your nose and sits in your teeth. They poured it through the kitchen window. They spilled it on the back steps. They worked fast. Practiced. One of them lit a rag and dropped it into a puddle near the porch. I didn't scream. I didn't move. I watched the orange bloom of fire jump like a beast across the wood. I saw the windows flash from black to gold. I saw my house, my home for 47 years, begin to vanish. The garage stayed untouched. I stayed very still. The roof caved in just after 4 a.m. It took the fire trucks 10 more minutes to arrive, long enough that no one expected survivors. The flames had died down by then. The house was a skeleton, charred beams and embers. One of the neighbors, Barbara, I think, stood out front in her bathrobe, hugging herself. "She was in there," she said. "She never left that house." I was 30 feet away. I had the camera. I had the recording. And I had not died. When the arson investigator showed up at 8:45 a.m., I stepped forward, slow and calm, with my scarf wrapped tight and the camera clutched in both hands. "You're going to want to see this," I told him. He blinked at me like I'd walked out of the fog. "Ma'am, are you—" "I'm Rosemary Hendricks," I said. "That's my house. They said I died in the fire. I didn't. But I know who tried to make sure I did." He took the camera. I watched him walk away with it. Watched him speak into his radio. Watched the shift happen, from quiet disbelief to full alert. And then I turned, slowly, and sat down on the curb. I didn't cry. Not even when I saw the wedding photo frame twisted in the wreckage. Not even when someone placed a blanket around my shoulders and whispered, "God have mercy. She was alive all along." No, I didn't cry. I was too busy remembering the way Jason had said goodnight. Too busy hearing again how he paused at the door and said, "Sleep tight, Mom," and locked it from the outside. The night before the fire, I baked a pie. It wasn't for anyone in particular, just a habit. The last time I had made that recipe was 6 months earlier, when my son still came by without an agenda. Lately, even his smile had conditions. "You don't need to do all that, Mom," he'd say, brushing past the kitchen. But I did it anyway. Something about cinnamon and sugar made the house feel like mine again, even when it no longer was. Jason had arrived around 6 in the evening. He didn't knock, hadn't in years, just let himself in with the key he insisted on keeping in case of emergency. "Brought you something," he said, holding up a brown paper bag like a prize. Inside, a frozen lasagna and a bottle of off-brand wine. "Thanks," I said, placing them on the counter. He didn't sit down, just walked through the rooms, touching light switches and glancing at the windows. "Everything working okay?" he asked. "Seems to be." "Locks good?" I looked at him. "You changed them yourself last spring." He smiled, a little too quickly. "Just checking. You know how these old doors get. Might be time to invest in one of those smart locks." I didn't reply. Jason hated silence, always had. When he was nervous, he filled the air with words. That night, he talked about the weather, about some new policy at work, about how the neighborhood had changed, and how we'd have to think about security. We. At 8:15, he handed me an envelope. "Don't worry," he said. "It's nothing big, just some standard forms, liability stuff in case the city ever inspects the house. They've been doing rounds, you know." I took the envelope, but didn't open it. "Jason." "It's nothing, Mom. Just sign it and I'll take care of the rest." I nodded, folded it in half, and placed it under a cookbook. That was the last time I saw his face before the fire. He left at 8:30. I locked the front door behind him. Then I turned on the porch light, just like always. Except that night, I didn't go back to the bedroom. I walked through the kitchen, past the laundry room, and out to the garage. It wasn't comfortable. A folding cot and an electric heater. My knees didn't like it, and neither did my back. But I had gotten used to it. The so-called renovation in the master bedroom had started 2 months earlier and never ended. First it was a leaky pipe, then the ceiling, then mold. Jason had said, "It's safer if you don't sleep in there." Safer. The garage didn't have curtains, just a dusty window with a view of the side yard and the back gate. That night, I sat with a blanket over my shoulders and turned the camera on one more time to make sure it still worked. I didn't know what I expected to catch. Maybe mice, maybe nothing. But I was tired of the way the house no longer felt like mine. Tired of Jason's strange visits. Tired of feeling like a guest in the home where I'd cooked 10,000 meals and folded every towel. So I pressed record. At 10:47 p.m., the porch light flicked off. I didn't touch the switch. At 11:03, I heard a car drive by and slow down. Not stop, just slow. The engine idled, then rolled away. That was nothing new. We were near the edge of town. Teenagers liked to park by the old gas station across the way. At 1 a.m., I finally lay down. I didn't undress, just pulled the blanket up and closed my eyes. At 3:12, the gate clicked. And now you know the rest. They say trauma scrambles your memory. Not mine. I remember every second of that night. The sound of the gasoline sloshing. The way the fire moved like it knew where to go. The smell of burning paint, old drywall, cloth. I watched it all through the gap in the garage door, silent, alive. At 4:21, I opened the garage from the inside. Smoke had already turned the sky brown. I walked down the driveway barefoot, holding the camera like it was a newborn. And when the fire trucks came, I didn't wave. I just watched. The garage wasn't meant to be lived in. It was cold in the mornings and smelled faintly of oil, even though I hadn't owned a working car in over a decade. The windows were high and dusty, the walls unfinished. But I made do. After Jason's renovation started, it was the only space he hadn't claimed. At first, he said it would just be for a few nights. The contractor needed access, he said. He needed to gut the whole bedroom wall. He even moved my mattress out there himself, like he was doing me a favor. "It's temporary, Mom," he said. "Promise." I didn't argue. What would have been the point? The renovations never began. No hammer, no paint, just excuses. The bedroom stayed locked. The light bulb burned out and was never replaced. One night, I peeked through the crack in the door and saw boxes. None of them mine. The garage became my corner of the world. I brought my tea kettle out there. A lamp, a small electric heater. I didn't complain, not even when the cold crept into my bones. I told myself I was lucky. Some women my age lived in basements or shared rooms in care homes. At least I had a roof. At least I had a lock. It was only after Jason started talking about security that I realized I was no longer safe. The questions were too pointed, the visits too short. And then the day he came by and asked where I kept my documents. "Just curious," he said, shrugging. "I mean, if anything ever happened, it's good to have all your stuff organized." That evening, I looked through the drawer where I kept my papers. The will was gone. My heart didn't pound. Not right away. It just sank. Like something inside me had been quietly preparing for this. I sat down and called the local electronics store. "What's your smallest security camera?" I asked. They had a model the size of a plum. Wi-Fi enabled. Motion triggered. I paid cash and had it running by nightfall. I didn't tell anyone. Not even Helen, my neighbor, who always meant well but couldn't keep her mouth shut. I set it up on the garage shelf. Framed it toward the door, angled enough to see the kitchen entrance if the inner door ever opened. 3 nights later, it recorded Jason. Not his face. He was careful with that. But the back of his coat, unmistakable, and his voice, just low enough to recognize. "No, she's asleep." I checked. "We've got maybe 10 minutes. He was on the phone. I watched the footage 5 times. Then I downloaded it. And every clip after that. The camera captured them coming back 2 more times. Once with flashlights. Once with something that looked like a blueprint. I couldn't hear everything, but I heard enough. Make it look electrical. Old houses go up fast. No one's gonna question it. I didn't call the police. I didn't call anyone. I just waited. And that's how I ended up in the garage, in a folding cot, on the night my son burned down the home he grew up in, with me still in it. Only I didn't die, and I didn't lose the recording. They didn't recognize me at first. The firefighters moved like they had a job to do, and they did. God bless them. I've never seen such precision. Hoses flung, orders shouted, boots crushing the frosted lawn. My home was almost gone by the time the last of the embers gave up, and they didn't expect to find anyone alive inside. That's what they told each other. Fully engulfed. Nothing salvageable. Probably didn't feel a thing. I stood behind the neighbor's hedge, wrapped in an old quilt from the garage. Smoke had curled its way into my hair, my lungs, my throat. I must have looked like a ghost. That's probably why no one noticed me. Barbara from across the street brought out a thermos. I watched her give it to one of the responders. She was still living there, wasn't she? Mrs. Hendricks? Poor thing. All alone. She had a son, someone said. Him? He never came around. I haven't seen him in months. I didn't correct them. Let them mourn me. Let the world, just for a few hours, believe that Rosemary Hendricks died quietly in her sleep, swallowed by smoke and memory. It was strange, watching your own eulogy from the bushes. I didn't feel much. Just the ache in my knees and the weight of the camera in my coat pocket. I could hear Jason's voice in my head. "You'll be safer in the garage, Mom." The garage was intact. The fire never reached it. Detached structures, the inspector would say later. Smart design. Lucky, they'd add. But I knew better. It wasn't luck. It was calculation. They wanted the house, not the garage. The insurance wouldn't pay more for my body. They'd already filled out enough paperwork to prove I was dead. At 8:20 a.m., a dark SUV pulled up. A man stepped out in slacks and a jacket with the state seal on the shoulder. Arson investigator. He had that steady, methodical look, the kind you develop from years of seeing terrible things and knowing exactly what they're worth. I waited until he'd walked the perimeter, taken his notes, crouched to examine a piece of scorched wiring. Then I stepped out from behind the hedge. "Excuse me," I said. My voice cracked. "Sir?" He looked up, startled, then wary. I took a step closer. "You're going to want to see this," I said, holding out the camera. He didn't take it right away. "Ma'am, are you—" "Rosemary Hendricks," I said. "This is my house." "They think I died in that fire." "I didn't." He blinked. I held out the camera again. My hands didn't shake. "I was in the garage. I recorded everything." He took it slowly, glanced at the screen, pressed play. His face changed after 10 seconds. After a minute, he looked up at me again. Not with suspicion, with something else. Something colder. "Is there anywhere you can sit down?" he asked. I nodded toward the neighbor's porch. My knees were about to give out anyway. He followed me, camera still playing in his hand. And for the first time in 12 hours, I let myself feel it. Not fear, not anger, relief. The neighbor's porch swing creaked beneath my weight. I hadn't sat on it in years, not since Harold passed, and Helen stopped hosting her Wednesday tea. Now I sat wrapped in the same garage quilt, hands clasped in my lap like a schoolgirl waiting for discipline. The investigator stood a few feet away, still watching the footage. He hadn't said a word in nearly 6 minutes. The screen cast flickers of light across his face. Orange, yellow, pale blue from the garage. I didn't need to see it again to know what was there. Jason and the other man, the cans, the matches, the laughter. My son's voice saying, "She's probably out cold by now." The silence felt like it might swallow me. Finally, he looked up. "My name's Eric Mason," he said. "State Fire Marshal's office." I nodded. "I need to ask, how did you get this footage?" "I filmed it," I said simply. "You said you were in the garage?" "Yes, sleeping there for the last 2 months." His brow furrowed. "Why?" "It was the only space left that was mine." He didn't press further. Maybe he understood. Maybe he'd seen enough cases where renovation meant eviction in slow motion. This footage," he began, glancing back at the screen, "is not only evidence of arson, it's attempted murder." I didn't flinch. "They thought I was inside the house," I said. "They made sure I would be." He took a slow breath. "Who were the men in the video?" "My son," I said. "Jason Hendricks. The other one I don't know by name, friend of his. But you can see the tattoo. It's on both arms. Some kind of barbed wire." Mason nodded. I saw it. The wind shifted. Smoke still hung low in the air. Somewhere behind the house, a fireman coughed. "I need you to come with me, Mrs. Hendricks. We'll take you to the station, file a full report. You'll be safe. Is there anyone who can look after you for a day or two?" I looked at Helen's front door. She hadn't said a word this whole time, just peered out through the curtains like the world was unfolding too fast for her to catch up. But I knew Helen. She'd make tea before I even finished asking. "My neighbor," I said. "I can stay there tonight." Mason hesitated, then handed me back the camera. "I've got the file now. We'll send someone by later to collect the device for chain of custody. You keep it with you until then." I nodded. He looked at the house one last time, or what was left of it. Then he turned and walked toward his vehicle, already talking into his radio. Helen finally opened the door. She didn't ask questions, just stepped aside. I followed her inside without a word. For the first time in 47 years, I slept in a stranger's bed. In a house that wasn't mine, but I was alive. And tomorrow, my son would be facing charges for trying to change that. I didn't cry when the house went up in flames. I didn't cry when they said I was dead. But I cried in the station, quietly, while Investigator Mason sat across from me, watching the footage a second time. Not for me, for the sound of my son's voice. It wasn't the words, it was how casual they sounded. "She's out," Jason said, off camera. "She sleeps like a rock. Let's make it quick." The lighter clicked. I'd watched him take his first steps on that kitchen floor. I'd patched his jeans when he fell off his bike in the same hallway he later doused with fuel. I'd buried his father, held him close at the funeral, promised him everything would be okay. Now, here he was, on video, setting my life on fire. Mason didn't say anything for a long time after the footage ended. He leaned forward, elbows on the desk, hands clasped. "I've sent this to our legal team," he said. "This isn't just arson. This is conspiracy, attempted homicide, and insurance fraud at a minimum. We'll be issuing warrants within the day." He looked at me carefully. "Do you understand what that means, Mrs. Hendricks?" I nodded. "Your son will be arrested." "I know. You'll have to testify." "I plan to." He tapped his fingers once, twice, then stopped. "I'm sorry," he said, and it felt like he meant it. "I'm not," I replied. That surprised him. Maybe he thought I'd flinch or waver. But I'd had enough years to learn what love isn't. Love doesn't ask you to disappear, doesn't seal you into garages or lie with a smile. I spent the rest of the afternoon filling out statements, signing forms, giving the names of neighbors, contractors, anyone who might corroborate my story. Helen had called my niece in Bangor, who offered to come take me in, but I declined. "This is my town," I told her over the phone. "If I have to watch it burn to the ground, I'll do it from here." By evening, the footage had already made it to the district attorney's office. They called Mason while I was still sitting in the side room. "Solid," he said after hanging up. "They'll push for a no-bail hold once he's picked up." "Any idea where he might be?" I gave him Jason's address. He'd bought a house with a finished basement and 2-car garage, claimed it was an investment. I had given him the down payment myself 5 years earlier. He said it was temporary, that I'd live there too, eventually. But I'd never even seen the inside. They sent a unit out that night. I didn't ask for updates. Instead, I walked back to Helen's, made myself a cup of tea, and stared at the blank space in her living room wall where a mirror used to hang. She said it fell during a storm last year and never got replaced. I found that comforting, somehow. The idea that even homes that don't burn still lose their reflections. Before bed, I took the camera out of my purse and set it gently on the dresser. It had survived. So had I. That night, I didn't sleep much. Helen's guest bed was softer than I expected, and my bones weren't used to softness anymore. But it wasn't just the mattress. It was the quiet. My own house had its sounds. Familiar creaks, the subtle shift of old pipes, wind tapping loose shutters. Even the garage had a rhythm. Here, it was too still, too polite. I lay awake and listened to the distant hum of a refrigerator and the even breathing of a friend I'd known for 40 years, now just down the hall, who didn't yet know what to say to me. No one did. At sunrise, I got up, made coffee, and opened Helen's kitchen window. Smoke still lingered faintly in the air. Across the yard, where my house used to be, there was nothing but blackened debris and skeletal beams. A single wall still stood, the one with the dining room window. I remembered how I used to watch the mail truck from there, years ago, waiting for Jason's college acceptance letter. He had gotten in. He just never came back the same. By 8 a.m., the phone rang. Helen answered, then passed it to me. "It's the investigator," she whispered. Mason's voice was calm as ever. "He's in custody," he said. "We picked him up at his house around midnight. The other man, Kyle was with him. We've got both in holding. Jason didn't resist." I said nothing. "He asked for a lawyer immediately, didn't ask about you." That didn't surprise me either. "What happens now?" I asked. "We'll process them formally today. The DA is pushing for expedited charges. It's open and shut with the footage you gave us, and your testimony, of course. You'll likely be called to the preliminary hearing next week." "Will I see him?" I asked, quieter than I meant to. "Only if you choose to. You're not obligated." I didn't answer that part. He waited, then added, "And Mrs. Hendricks, we've confirmed the insurance policy. It was filed under your name, forged signature, filed 3 weeks ago." Of course it was. He continued, "Claim would have paid out over $480,000 if you had been confirmed deceased. The timing was tight. They set the fire the night before a planned inspection, probably to avoid inconsistencies." He paused. "They thought of everything, except you." I hung up shortly after. Helen was kind enough not to press. She just set a plate of toast in front of me and refilled my coffee. We sat there like two widows in a war zone, watching a morning that didn't feel like ours. Later, she drove me to the community center. They'd set up a temporary claims desk for fire victims. Of course, I was the only victim that week. Still, they gave me forms, asked if I had ID, if I had plans. Plans? I said no. No plans, no place, no family. "Well, that's not quite true," I said finally. "I have a niece in Bangor." "Could she take you in?" the woman asked gently. She offered. "And you declined?" I did. She smiled a little. "Then maybe you've got more plans than you think." I took the forms and left. Outside, the sky was pale and cloudless. It felt wrong, as if the world should have been darker, more charred, to match what had burned inside me. Back at Helen's, I asked for a broom and gloves. "What for?" she asked. "I want to go home," I said. "What's left of it?" She didn't argue. At noon, I stood on the edge of my ruined yard and swept a path through the ash. The porch steps were gone. I stood where they used to be, just the scorched outline of their shape left on the ground, and tried to remember how many times I had climbed them. Carrying groceries, holding Jason's hand, dragging suitcases after Harold's funeral. No one ever thinks of steps as memory, but they are. Helen stood a few feet behind me, her hand resting on the fence post. She knew not to follow. I stepped carefully across the debris. Not much was recognizable. The couch was a skeleton. the kitchen table a warped, half-melted slab. I picked my way to the corner where the living room once stood. A piece of the wall was still up. My wedding picture had hung there. The frame was gone. That was for the best. I crouched slowly, carefully, and picked up a bit of blackened wood. It crumbled in my fingers. This house had been ours. Harold and I bought it in 1972, just after he got back from the Navy. It was small then, with no garage and only one bathroom. But the yard was deep, and the trees had strong roots. He built the garage himself in '79. Said he wanted a place to put his tools, but really it was to keep Jason's bikes from rusting in the rain. We added a second bedroom when I got pregnant again, but the baby never came. After the miscarriage, Harold left the crib in the attic. "Just in case," he said. Jason never asked for a sibling. He liked being the center of everything. And we let him be. I remember his first birthday in this house. He smashed cake into his face and cried when I tried to wipe it off. Harold laughed so hard he nearly dropped the camera. That video sat in the hallway closet for years. I wonder now, did Jason throw it away? Or did he watch it and feel nothing? When Harold got sick, Jason came home for exactly 4 days. "Work," he said. "Obligations." He kissed his father's forehead the night before he died and said, "I'll handle everything, Mom." And in a way, he did. He handled the funeral. He handled the paperwork. He handled the sale of Harold's truck and the cancellation of his veteran's pension. He handled the finances for a little while. Until I realized what he meant by handling. And still I didn't stop loving him. That's what no one tells you about being a mother. Love isn't elastic. It doesn't stretch and snap back. It frays slowly, like old thread, until you're left holding the end of something that used to be strong. I stood in the ruins of my kitchen and looked toward where the hallway once led to Jason's childhood bedroom. That room had blue wallpaper with white stars. He peeled it off with his fingernails when he was bored. I repainted it 3 times before he moved out. Now it was gone, erased. But I was still here, and that mattered. The man who knocked on Helen's door wore a suit 2 numbers too expensive for our neighborhood. I knew before he introduced himself that he wasn't there for Helen. He smiled, practiced, and hollow. "Mrs. Hendricks, I'm Stephen Klein. I represent your son, Jason Hendricks." I didn't offer to shake his hand. He cleared his throat, undeterred. "I wonder if we might have a brief conversation, privately." Helen looked at me, eyebrows raised. I nodded once. She retreated to the kitchen. I led him to the front room, where I'd been folding borrowed laundry on the couch that wasn't mine. He sat carefully, like afraid of creasing his pants. "I'm here to offer my clients full cooperation," he began, opening a slim leather folder. "Jason is deeply distressed by recent events. He was unaware of the full consequences of his actions and is committed to making amends in any way possible." I looked at him. Just looked. He shifted slightly. "Given the sensitive nature of this matter, and your family relationship, we believe a resolution outside of the court system would be preferable." "To whom?" I asked. He hesitated. "To everyone, surely." "Not to me." He adjusted his cuffs. "Mrs. Hendricks, my client is prepared to issue a formal apology for the misunderstanding." "It wasn't a misunderstanding," I said quietly. He blinked. "It was attempted murder." He started to speak. I raised one hand. "Let me be clear, Mr. Klein. My son set fire to my home. He forged my signature. He filed an insurance claim, and he watched it burn, believing I was asleep inside. That's not a mistake. That's a plan." His mouth opened, then closed. I leaned forward. I'm 75 years old. I've paid off every debt in my life, in dollars and in patience. I won't pay to protect the man who tried to erase me. The folder in his lap stayed open. A pen sat inside, ready for a signature that would never come. Jason is your only child, he said softly. This will destroy him. He already destroyed something, I said. He just didn't finish the job. Silence. Then I stood. This conversation is over. He rose as well, the professional mask back in place. I'll convey your position. Do that. He left without another word. Helen returned with tea. She didn't ask what he said, just poured quietly and handed me the cup. I held it with both hands and stared out the window. My son tried to kill me, I said aloud for the first time. And it didn't feel like betrayal. It felt like truth. It made the papers by Sunday. Helen handed it to me over toast, her lips pressed tight, like she didn't want to speak before I saw it for myself. Local woman survives fire set by son. Records the crime herself. Beneath that, a photo of my house, or what was left of it. Taken just after sunrise. In the smoke, you could barely make out the collapsed roof and half a charred porch beam, and at the bottom, a line that made me flinch. Investigators say the suspect believed his mother was inside. My name was printed in bold. Rosemary Hendricks, 75, of Ashbridge. The article was respectful enough, mostly facts. The charges? Arson, attempted murder, insurance fraud. A quote from the district attorney calling it an extraordinary case of familial betrayal. No mention of the footage, thankfully, but still, enough. By noon, the phone started ringing. Helen unplugged it. You don't owe anyone a single comment, she said. I nodded, but still sat by the window, watching people pass by with the paper under their arms, folded to the page where my life now lived. Around 3 p.m., I heard voices on the porch. She was always a quiet one. They say the son was in debt. Well, what kind of mother makes her kid that desperate? Helen opened the door and stared them down until they scattered. You don't get to whisper her story, she muttered. But the truth is, they would. People always whisper about women like me. Later that evening, a letter came in the mail. No return address. Just my name, written in shaky pen. Inside, you should have just given him the money. No wonder he didn't want you. I read it once, folded it neatly, and threw it in the trash. Helen looked at me, waiting. People don't like it when you survive something you weren't supposed to, I said quietly. She nodded. The news kept spreading. A segment on the evening local broadcast. A blog post from a neighbor's niece titled, The Fire That Shook Ashbridge. Most of it painted me as a victim. Some called me a hero. But a few, just a few, turned their heads sideways and asked, what kind of mother raises a son who could do that? And I had no answer for them, because I'd asked myself the same question every day since the fire. I wrote the letter 3 times before I sent it. The first version was too angry. 4 pages of everything he'd ever done to hurt me, from lies to that final match. The second tried to be diplomatic, but ended up sounding like an apology, and I had no intention of giving him that. The third one, I kept. I wrote it on plain paper with a pen that scratched a little on the curves, folded it once, addressed it to the Ashbridge County Jail. No dear, no love. Just this. Jason, you don't get to speak first anymore, so I'm writing this before you can try. I know you're going to say it wasn't what it looked like, that you were desperate, that you didn't mean for it to go that far, that you didn't think I'd be home. But we both know you did. You planned it. You locked the garage door from the outside. You filed the insurance papers in my name. You lit the fire. You watched. And you left. What I don't understand, what I still can't find the shape of, is when I stopped being your mother in your eyes. Was it the day I said no to the loan? Was it the day I told you I wouldn't change my will? Was it when I asked too many questions? Or was it years earlier when you stopped calling me anything at all? I know how you see me now. Small, in the way. Too old to matter. But I built that house with your father. I raised you in it. I buried him in the same town where you now sit in a cell for trying to erase me. I'm not sending this to punish you. Life will take care of that. I'm sending it because I need you to know I survived. Not just the fire. Not just the betrayal. All of it. And I will keep surviving. You will not hear from me again. Rose Mary Hendricks. I walked to the post office that morning myself, handed it to the clerk, paid in cash, and walked back to Helen's house in silence, with my hands in my pockets and the wind on my face, thinking only this: he doesn't get to have the last word. I do. The summons came in a plain envelope with a gold-embossed seal. I opened it slowly, not because I didn't know what was inside, but because I already did. You are required to appear before the Ashbridge County Court as a witness in the matter of the state versus Jason Hendricks. The hearing was set for the following Tuesday at 9 a.m. Helen offered to drive me, but I declined. I took the bus. I wanted to walk those courthouse steps by myself, to feel them under my feet, not as someone broken, but as someone still standing. The courthouse smelled like polished wood and old air. It had that quiet hum buildings get when justice is supposed to happen inside them, restrained, uncomfortable, humming with tension. They called me to the stand at 9:47 a.m. Jason was already seated at the defense table, his wrists cuffed, his hair cut short like a boy again. He didn't look at me when I walked past. I raised my hand, swore to tell the truth. And then they asked me to speak. No one interrupted. No one tried to soften the questions. They asked me about that night, about the months leading up to it, about the documents, about the locks, about the footage. I told them everything. In clear, calm sentences. I didn't cry. When the prosecutor asked, "And what relation is the defendant to you, ma'am?" I said, "He's my son, by blood only." There was a moment of silence after that. Even the judge looked up. I didn't flinch. When they played the footage, the same minute long clip I'd watched so many times it no longer felt like my life, I didn't look at Jason. I watched the jury instead. Most of them looked away. One woman, middle-aged, kept her eyes on the screen the entire time. When it ended, she looked at me, not with pity, with something like sorrow, maybe even respect. When it was the defense's turn, Jason's lawyer didn't ask me much. Just one question, really. "Do you believe your son intended to kill you?" I looked straight at Jason for the first time since I took the stand. "Yes," I said. That was all. When it was over, I stepped down, walked back past him. He didn't meet my eyes. He didn't speak. Not a word. And I was glad. Outside, the wind had picked up. The bus stop was 3 blocks away. I walked the distance slowly, the way you do when you're leaving a place that won't matter to you anymore. I didn't feel triumphant, but I felt something else. Free. The court didn't send flowers. No medal, no thank you. Just a folded transcript and a receipt for my testimony. Signed, dated, filed. Afterward, The days passed quietly. Jason stayed in custody. The news moved on. Ashbridge turned its attention to the next fire, the next scandal, the next obituary. I walked to the library once a week, returned to the clinic for my checkup. No one stopped me. No one stared anymore. It was like I'd been folded back into the world. Except the world I returned to wasn't the one I knew. Helen offered to let me stay longer. She even cleared a closet for me. But I told her gently, "It's time I go home." She nodded, said she understood. The house had been declared a total loss. The insurance company rescinded the payout once the fraud was confirmed, and the bank, which never saw a single mortgage payment from Jason, quietly wrote off the damage. I wasn't liable. I was just the woman who didn't die. I used my savings, what was left, to rent a small aluminum trailer from a retired man named Walt who lived down by the river. He helped me park it right on the edge of my lot, the same land Harold and I bought in 1972. The trailer had one working stove burner, a leaking faucet, and a twin bed that groaned when I turned in my sleep. I didn't mind. I brought what little I had with me: 2 bags of clothes, 3 photo albums Helen had kept safe, a kettle, a chair. The rest had burned. Most days I sat on a lawn chair under the tree that had once shaded our porch. It was half charred now, bark peeling like old paint. But it stood. That was enough. People passed by sometimes. Some waved, some didn't. A few even stopped to talk. "You're brave," one woman told me. "I'm old," I replied. "Brave is what you are when you've run out of other options." The ground where the house once stood was now flat and black. No one had cleaned it. No one was coming. I swept the ashes myself. Each morning, I cleared a little more: a melted fork, a piece of tile, a nail. Some things had turned to dust. Others refused. One afternoon, I found the doorknob from the back door. Still whole, still round, still cool in my hand, like it remembered what it meant to be touched. I washed it in a bowl and placed it on the windowsill of the trailer. That was mine. That was home. At night, I made tea, sat by the window, and let the silence return. Not the silence of being forgotten, the silence of being intact. It rained the night Helen came by. She didn't knock, just stood under the awning of the trailer with her scarf dripping and a bag of groceries clutched to her chest. I opened the door and stepped aside. She didn't speak right away, just unpacked things onto my tiny counter. Apples, tea, 1 tin of shortbread cookies. "I figured," she said finally, "you weren't eating much." "I'm eating," I said. "Just not cooking." She smiled a little. "Well, you've earned a break." We sat by the window, rain ticking gently against the glass. She sipped her tea without sugar. I drank mine with a splash of milk, like always. For a while, we said nothing. Then she asked softly, "Do you miss him?" I didn't ask who she meant. I answered carefully. "I miss the boy he was. The one who used to crawl into our bed when there was thunder. The one who made up songs about his dog and forgot the words halfway through." Helen nodded. "And Harold?" she asked. That one took longer. "I miss the space he filled," I said. The second plate on the table, the sound of his boots, his back when he mowed the lawn. I even miss the way he never closed the bathroom cabinet. Helen smiled into her cup. "I don't miss the arguments," I added. "We had those too." "Does it get quieter?" she asked after a pause. "The loneliness?" "No," I said. "But it gets lighter." She looked at me. "Like wearing wet clothes," I explained. "At first, it clings, heavy and cold. But then you get used to the weight. You move slower. You expect less warmth. And one day you find yourself stepping into it without flinching. Helen sighed, but not in sadness, just understanding. I worry, she said, that we're the last of something. We are, I said. But that's not the tragedy people think it is. We lived in full houses. We heard laughter behind doors. We sat through every kind of silence. That leaves a trace. And what about what comes next? She asked. For us? She nodded. We shrink, I said. Not in worth, in presence. Our world narrows. A single chair, a radio, a favorite spoon, and somehow that smallness becomes peace. Helen set her cup down and reached for my hand. Her fingers were thinner than I remembered. Mine, too. I used to think we disappeared, she said. Women like us. We don't, I said. We just become harder to find. We sat there, hands warm between cups of tea, while the rain washed what was left of the ash into the earth. I boiled water like I always did, slowly, with the old enamel kettle Helen had given me when I moved into the trailer. It whistled a little high that morning, like a bird call through thin metal. The sun had just begun to stretch across the ashes where my house once stood. Most of it was gone now, cleaned up, swept, removed by a volunteer crew that never asked for thanks. The earth was bare and stubborn. Nothing had grown there yet. But I'd planted something. Lavender. Just a row. It may not take. The soil was tired, but still. I put the seeds in the ground with my own hands. That meant something. I poured the hot water over the tea bag, let it steep. There was mail on the counter, a single envelope, no return address, just my name in block letters. The handwriting was neat. Mail. I opened it slowly. Inside, a short note. Mrs. Hendricks, you probably don't remember, but my father died in a house fire when I was 11. No charges were ever brought. Everyone said it was an accident. That's why I became an investigator. What you did, coming forward, recording what no one believed, standing in court without a single tear for sympathy, it reminded me why I started. You didn't just survive. You exposed something most people would have buried. Thank you for not staying quiet. Eric Mason. I folded the note and placed it in the drawer under my spoons. Not because I needed a reminder, but because I liked knowing someone out there knew the shape of what I'd done and didn't look away. I carried my tea outside and sat in the old lawn chair. The tree overhead was blooming again, a small rebellion. Half its branches still blackened, but new leaves came anyway. They didn't ask for permission. Neither did I. From where I sat, the world looked ordinary. A truck passed on the road. A child shouted 2 streets over. Somewhere, someone was late for work. And I drank my tea. Not in grief. Not in victory. Just as a woman who had walked through fire and stepped out the other side still holding her name. If you're reading this and someone made you feel small, if someone took your chair, your room, your right to speak, if someone smiled while they locked the door from the outside, just know, you are not what they tried to burn. You are what remained. Even ashes can grow roots again.